Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our free webinar series, Encouraging Resiliency Through Trauma, Webinar 4. And with us today is Dr. Michael Hylen. He'll be speaking about dancing through life, growing emotionally intelligent children. We want to thank Dr. Hylen for being here and giving his time. Dr. Hylen is an expert on social emotional learning and growing character education and character development. And so we want to welcome him and learn from him how we can work with our kids and helping them grow emotionally and intelligently. So with that, I'll turn it over to him.
I'm sorry about that. My computer was frozen. I had trouble I had it locked. Now, I hope you can hear me at this point. You should be seeing, of course, bubbles on the screen right now. I appreciate your patience, and I'm going to open up my screen for you. Make sure it's sharing. So you should be seeing my webinar here. And I appreciate you taking this time to join me. I will not be able to see the chat here, but I appreciate Martha Green for being willing to follow that for me and give me feedback. So, because I want to encourage you to share your thoughts as I walk through this. Thank you, Pam, for the introduction. I appreciate Deeper Dive Learning and Cloud9 giving me this opportunity to share. This presentation comes from a copyrighted professional development I generally do with teachers, but I'll talk about how it applies, comes from the parent world. It can be anywhere from an hour to 3, depending on interactions and stuff I have if I'm doing a full professional development. But so it's generally about an hour if I'm doing the presentation. So we're going to do about half of it today, Dancing Through Life, Growing Emotionally Intelligent. Thursday will be a second component where we look specifically at the component of emotion coaching. Why Dancing Through Life? Okay. Why that title? Well, I like to equate anything with life, things like marriage and stuff, as a dance. You know, when we first enter the floor, when we first get into it, there's some apprehension. Some people have some apprehensions. There's some enthusiasm, some excitement. There's this sense that it's going to be this wonderful thing. You're really looking forward to it. But then as it happens, little bumps and bruises may happen along the way. I mean, let's face it, we're not all Fred Astaires or Ginger Rogers. Maybe I'm showing my age, maybe Beyonce, I don't know who the great dancers are today. But we have this, but we tend to make little mistakes, step on toes, and make an embarrassing move or something. And it's how we respond in that moment that makes a difference. So there are two things that come out of that. There's an action, response, and then there's an emotion, though, we forget that leads to that action. Are we mad about the person stepping on us? Am I embarrassed because I did something wrong or led wrong? And so this is all about how do we get children thinking about their emotions and then how they respond to those emotions, okay? So first, a little bit about me. I'm from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I went through Harvard University for 4 years. Not for school. My high school was on the other side of it, so I had to walk from my house. I had to walk through Harvard University to get to my high school. I myself am from University of Massachusetts. Married 25 years. It's time to update the slide, but this was copyright, so I didn't change it. I have 6 children, 5 daughters, 1 son. I'm getting them out of the house these days. 13 years as a teacher, okay, not educator, because I actually have a lot more as an educator. 16 as a principal, 8 as a university professor. I want you to think about why would I want you to know these things, okay? I actually have 3 reasons I'm going to put up and then add something else to it, but why do I want you to know these things? Well, the first is you might as well know why I talk this way. I always get this, you must be from New England. You must be from somewhere up there because of the way I talk. So yes, you need to know I live in Kentucky now. I'll be moving into South Carolina, but I am from the Northeast and still carry that accent, okay? The second thing is much of what I learned actually comes from being a parent. This study happened for me when I started this research many years ago. It happened in a very interesting event. My 2 oldest children, who are in their 20s now, were, I want to say 3 and 5 at the time. I was a high school principal. I came in the house. My wife was home. Well, she was stay-at-home mom at that time. Walked in, and my 2 children, my 2 daughters, were sitting on the step when you came in the door, holding each other's hand, saying nice things to each other. This was not a common occurrence in my house, so I knew something was up, and I turned and I looked at my wife, and I could tell from the look on her face they weren't doing this because they loved each other, but it was more of a consequence. And she said, and I said, what happened? She said they had a fight, and I wanted to remind them how much they like each other. And she said to me, what would you have done? Being sarcastic by nature, and lucky my wife wasn't very upset with me afterwards, I simply said, I'm a second school principal. I would have suspended them, and that would have solved the issue. But the reality is, as I thought about that, really how we just take things sometimes, I did as a principal, as an educator, I separated out. I looked at it as a set of consequences versus how do I address the issue and really get to the bottom line of it. So I started studying this as a parent. And what I've learned, a lot of this comes from what I started reading as a parent, and then how can I apply this as an educator. So it applies to both worlds. So if you're a parent here, this applies to you. Well, if you're a teacher, educator, it applies to you. Well, and if you're both, it should blend nicely. The last thing is I am an educator, okay? So it does work in schools too. Sometimes, I will say this, and there's no offense to secondary educators because I was one for my entire life. Elementary teachers tend to be more like this by nature. Secondary teachers get more focused on this subject matter, okay? So that's the gist of this story and how it happens. Okay? All right. Okay. I lead in with this. I want you to think about this because I really had to think about this both as a parent and as a classroom. I've come to the frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in my classroom, in my home. The way I approach things, my personal approach creates the climate. I create the climate, my daily mood. I've learned this as a teacher. Even as a parent, I possess more power to make my child's life miserable or joyous, my student's life. That can be a tool of torture or instrument of inspiration. Humiliate or hurt, okay? Heal, humor, okay? But it is my response to science the crisis. I really, every night, this drives me crazy because I go to bed thinking, okay, did I do something today that really created a bad climate? Or did I respond some way when people were in a real positive mood? Did I respond in a manner that changed that mood? Or vice versa, was it they were in a bad mood and I did something to build it up? So one of the first things about this, when we look at emotion coaching, when we work with emotional intelligence of children, is really a self-reflective component. What is my role in all this? So I want to look at the role of the adult in all this first, and then get into working with children. Okay. First thing here, I want you to look at this picture. Now, if we were in the same room, in a room together, I would actually have you walk through this this activity. But in this case, I just want you to reflect on this and think about some of the things that are happening in homes today. And this is not to say all homes are this way, but it's just to think about this and maybe how this could apply in my home. How as a teacher, the students coming into my classroom, what they may be learning outside the classroom or how it may be for them. And, you know, just some things to think about. They're the obvious ones, the unattached father. I actually did this presentation once, and someone said, well, what's clearly the problem is the mother's not in the picture. True. In this case, but what I wasn't focused on was that it was the dad, but it was the lack of interaction. But we also have to think of the challenges of single parents too. Okay, I have to laugh at this picture because recently my son got Call of Duty, an Xbox game that he plays. And so I find it interesting because I don't do this. I actually sit next to him and watch the game with him and ask him why this happened and get into it and all like that. It's funny because I'm not against the games, okay? It's what do we do with the things that happen? Although I'm not really fond of games like Grand Theft Auto where the goal is to see how many cars you can get, or cop killer, how many cops you can kill. I'm not really fond of that, but some of the games, what I do is sit down and talk about what is real, what isn't, have those conversations with our kids, okay? But we have to think about this. As a parent, how am I interacting with my children? As a teacher, what are those home experiences our kids are coming into, and where are they learning these other things? Okay. All right, so what is the adult's role? Whether you're a parent or a teacher, in this case, one, you are a role model, okay? And I want to encourage you to become a coach. Notice I say coach and not a teacher in here, and I'll explain the difference as we go through this presentation. But the reason is this. You want to be able to relate with young people in a manner that moves the relationship past the surface level into a deeper understanding and acceptance. And if you think that comes naturally as a parent, trust me, I know from experience it doesn't. It's something I have to work at as a parent as well. I find it almost easier to do as a principal, as a teacher. I was more patient and willing to sit down and really work with students and accept that role than I was as a parent. I really had to work harder at it as a parent in getting better at working with my students on this. So the first thing I had to realize is what I do does model, okay? I catch myself saying something to my children or my students, and then if I could do something different or say something that I just told them not to do, and I catch myself being negative about something, I'm like, well, that just shot that whole thing, So the idea is we are a model, but I want to be a coach, and what a coach does is a coach. And like a teacher, I'm just using the phrase coach for this, but like a teacher, sees a mistake, sees something, and then helps that person become better at it. The difference between, the reason why I didn't choose a teacher, usually a teacher tells someone the right way to do it. The purpose of coaching is to get them to take their talents and to figure out ways to grow it and be good at it and let them become independent. So that's the reason why I use the phrase coach here versus teacher. Now, before we go any further, there are a couple of things that come up whenever I do this presentation, and there are two words, and it comes from a statement that I'll share with you in a little bit. But we need to think about as we interact with young people. As we get involved with young people in the lives of emotion coaching, two things come up all the time. Fairness. What is this idea of fairness? Life's not fair. This isn't fair. You're not fair. Okay? And equity. Okay, and the reason I say it comes from this. I was doing this presentation about this material once and was giving some examples of how to working with young people, and someone said, well, I really believe what you're trying to do, but I'm sorry, I believe in fairness and equity. So we got talking, and I understood what was meant by equity. If two people do the same thing, they get the same consequence. What I didn't understand is the notion of being fair and impartial. Is it really fair that if two people do the same thing, they get the same consequence? I'll give you a simple example. One person's late to school because they overslept, wanted to sleep in, they had partied all night, came in, they're tired, they just didn't feel like it, and hey, too bad, this happened. I just stayed out too late, I wasn't responsible, I'm late. Another person, and this actually happened in one of my classes, was driving to school and hit a deer on the way to school. Was panicked, actually called Dad, not because the car was injured or something, but she was afraid of being late. And Dad came, gave her a different car. She came to school late. Now, there are people who say that doesn't matter, it's the same consequence. They're both late. But do we really do that? Our idea of fairness is, well, we understood the one situation was out of their control versus a situation that's in the control. As a parent, if you're a parent with more than one child, do you treat everyone exactly the same? Do you give everyone the same thing at the same age? Okay, well, at 5, this person got a red car, got a red dress, so it's 5. The next child got a red dress, so 5, Or do we understand our children in ways that we respond to them in different manners? The reason I say this is when you work with your children, you need to make clear what are those things that are considered rigid equality, no extenuating circumstances. Everyone is expected to make their bed, okay? No extenuating circumstances on that. You need to do that. versus those which are meant, do we really take a focus on, is my goal, is a consequence, let's put it this way, focused on helping the student or the young child become better. As parents, we tend to do that generally. Sometimes as teachers, it's easier to stick to the consequence idea of it. But I want to say, when we're looking at fairness, it's not about the consequences. It's about how are we helping that frame that student become better, or as a parent, how are we helping our child be better at decision making? This is all about what are we doing to be helping someone be better, a young child be better at decision making, a teenager making right decisions, and understanding that fairness sometimes means I might need something different than someone else because maybe I have a different skill set or maybe I have a different circumstance. Okay, so think of it in terms of that. Okay, remember in terms of needs. If my children don't need a free lunch program, we can provide for that. But we do know there are those students who do. And so I have no problem with that system. Okay, how do we think of fairness? Okay, why is emotion coaching important to young people? Okay, because here's what we want to do as an adult. One, we want to create a sense of trust and openness for that child to be genuine. Okay, we want to see who they really are. I see it all the time. We want to help a student, a child, reach their fullest potential. But you really can't know someone's fullest potential if you don't know them genuinely. Okay, I'm not sure that we ever really can know someone's fullest potential, but we can know what they can be if they're open and honest and transparent with us. Okay, so what we really want to do is develop relationships that move past the surface level to one of understanding and acceptance, even if that means we have our differences. Okay, I want my children to be open and honest with me. I do that now. They're teenagers. We want to have conversations about sex and drugs and alcohol. I admit that. Where are we on that? I want them to be open and feel that they can have an open and honest conversation with me about that. I want it with my students. I want them to be open because they will be accepted because we have an understanding of each other. Okay. More so, I want them to learn respect and responsibility and to act accordingly. Okay. In what we call the real world, because sometimes in my house, how we act in my house, I don't know if it is the real world. But when we talk about young people, what are the two main things I want them to learn? There are a lot of things. I want them to be kind. I want them to be gentle. I want all these different things. But most importantly, I want them to understand respect and responsibility. And I want them to know that despite their differences, each one of them is valid and important. Each one of mine, I have 6 children, and I can tell you no two are the same. And it's interesting to watch them interact with each other, okay? But I want each one of them to know that they are valid and they're important, regardless of how they respond differently than their siblings. In my classroom, regardless of how they respond differently than their classmates, okay? I want to throw this in real quick. I mentioned the phrase respect and responsibility. I want to make sure, though, that sometimes when we use those phrases, we make sure that we are defining and helping our children and our students know what that looks like in action, okay? Because we say it all the time, be respectful. But it is interesting, if we don't realize that some people's home lives or communal situations, respect may look entirely different. So when we use the phrase as adults, either as a teacher or as a parent, when I say be respectful, I tell them what specific actions I'm looking for. Okay. Responsibility, what does it look like? Well, it might be you want your child to clean their room every day, or be on time is an important thing. That shows responsibility. Okay. What is it that you consider responsibility? Submitting homework on time, if you're a teacher, as a parent, cleaning up after yourself. Okay, but one of the things you want to do, and I encourage you to do when you get a chance, write down, and it doesn't have to be 5, you can put whatever, write down what respect it looks like in action and what responsibility. They are verbs, so they're action words. And how would you teach those? How would you demonstrate those to either your students or to your children? And help them learn these things, give them opportunities to learn these things. That's the key. Okay. All right. So let's get to the gist here, because we want to grow. Sorry, got ahead of myself. We want to grow emotionally intelligent children. Okay, because the reality is behaviors are a reflection of an emotion and how students choose to respond to them. And here's what I found in my research. There are 4 ways that adults respond to children and in their behaviors, and how it consequently affects how they understand emotions. Okay, so this has 4 approaches teaching young persons how. These aren't actual approaches. These are ways that I've observed people over time doing the research that shows these are the way people responded to students and ultimate outcomes of how their emotions were in talking with them. And it comes down to classifying, coding it down to 4. So let's look at each one. First, let's look at the dismissing adult. Okay. What are some characteristics of it? Well, one treats young person's feelings as trivial and important. Okay. They're not really interested in how someone feels. They're interested in how they behave. Okay. They want negative emotions to disappear quickly. Okay. So if someone is sad or angry, they don't want to deal with it. All right. They're uncomfortable, annoyed, or overwhelmed by the youngsters acting out on emotions, or crying or whatever. They just don't want to deal with that. Okay. Sometimes they even see it as a ploy by the child to get what they want. All right. And they may believe actually that having negative emotions are harmful or toxic. So if you get angry, that's a bad thing. All right. Not that the actions are bad, but the emotions themselves are bad. And finally, they try to minimize those feelings and downplay the events that led to the emotion. Notice the downplaying that events. You shouldn't feel that way kind of thing. So you see, I have those questions down there. If I was part of a professional development here, we would talk about that. But think of someone that fit. What are some of the actions you see? How does the child react? But I'm going to move on for the sake of time, okay, and get to this. Here's what I found to be the effects of this young approach. Here's what research shows. Okay, 1, the child believes that their emotions, their feelings are wrong and not valid. Okay, I want you to think about this. Have you ever had someone say, "I don't know what's wrong with me"? I remember that. I was a principal once, and a young lady walked in and said, "Dr. Hylen, I don't know what's wrong with me." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" "I get angry." I said, "Well, then I don't know what's wrong with me. I get angry." Okay, the key is we don't want them to thinking emotions are a bad thing. Okay, they may have, and as a result, they have difficulty regulating their emotion because they're more worried about the fact that they feel the emotion than how they respond to it. Okay, so the dismissing adult, you want to be cautious. That's has these negative impacts. Okay. The second one is the disapproving. Now, it's somewhat similar, but in this case, they judge and criticize the actual expression of emotion. Okay. So now it's not just dismissing it that it's invalid, but now you're actually criticizing the child. Okay. Again, in this case, instead of negative emotions need to go away, they want them to be controlled. Okay. And they believe the person is using it to manipulate. Again, that's the ploy concept, but they see it as a power struggle because usually the disapproving adult is about power and control more than about helping the child grow. They're mostly concerned with obedience to authority as a result of their power struggle concept. They're feeling that they are the authority. You are just to obey what they say. So what does this lead to? Well, look familiar? Again, the child believes emotions. Sorry about that. Child believes the emotions are wrong and not valid. They feel there's something wrong with them, and they have difficulty regulating their emotions. And I want to be cautious. I probably shouldn't have used that phrase, regulating their emotion, because really what I want to look at is how do we respond, teaching students how do they respond to their emotions, teaching young people. How can you tell when a child or a teen is acting out to get attention their own way? I'm not saying sometimes I do know children who have done this, so you do see it from time to time. And so you have to address that also, okay? So think about that question as you reflect on the material today. How do you know the difference? Ask this, and I talked about this earlier. have you ever been told by an adult that a young person has issues? I had a teacher walk into my office once and say, he has issues. Explain that to me. Well, I have issues. We all have issues, and we learn to deal with them and how we respond to them. And our goal as adults, understand, is of these challenges, we all have emotions, okay? But it's how we respond to them that helps us we can either be positive or negative with our social behaviors, okay? So that brings us to our third approach, is what I call it, to how we model and work with students on emotion and intelligence, and that's the laissez-faire adult, okay? In this particular model, what we're looking at somebody who freely accepts emotions expressed by teen. Now, that sounds like a good thing, but I want to get more into detail about that so you understand why I'm saying it's probably not a good approach to teaching emotional intelligence to young people, okay? For example, they tend to offer comfort to negative behaviors. Now, a key there is the word behavior, not emotions. We want to comfort negative emotions, but not negative behaviors. And we'll talk more about that really if you come to the Thursday session on that, on the 5 habits. But the key there is if we comfort negative behaviors, they think they're okay to do, and they continue to do negative behaviors rather than dealing with the emotion and improving the behavior. We also don't teach the teen or the child about emotions, okay? We want them to understand anger. We want them to understand sadness, happiness. We want them to know terms to these different emotions. It also doesn't set limits. It tends to be permissive. So if a child gets upset and screams out at an inappropriate time, if we comfort that, then they think it's okay to be inappropriate and whenever they are frustrated. Okay. Again, what we're trying to do is teach good responses, positive social actions, even when experiencing negative emotions. It doesn't teach them problem-solving skills either. So if I get angry a lot and I punch things a lot, okay, I'm not learning problem-solving skills. Yeah, I may be getting out my frustration, but I could break my hand if I punch a wall, I could hurt something, I could get in trouble. Remember, you want to teach them problem-solving skills like, what is a better way to handle this? Or if I'm angry about something, how do I approach that person that made me angry? Or how do I deal with the event that made me angry? And then this laissez-faire adult tends to believe you just write off the emotions. Let them act that way, let them go on. It will eventually go away, and I'll be fine. They don't want to address it at all. They don't want to deal with it. Now, you notice that I put a box up there with 3 reasons adults may do this or what the child reactions may be. I do want to point out something with adult reasons. Sometimes adults do it because they're afraid to confront actions. Sometimes it's because they don't know how to confront actions. So sometimes it's a matter of, it's not that they want to be the child's best friend. It wasn't that they don't want to get on the child's bad side. It's more so that they really don't understand the impact of what they're doing. They don't know how to address the child properly or help them work through these things. So it's not always that someone is intentionally trying to be someone's buddy as much as understanding the circumstance. But the problem is, again, the child doesn't learn to regulate emotions. They have time concentrating, and most importantly, they have trouble getting along with others and forming friendships. They become annoying with their behaviors. In fact, all 3 of these approaches that we've discussed do have an impact on children forming positive friendships. Okay, so I have the questions up there, encourage you to look at that. But I want to get to, for the sake of time, this idea that I say become a coach. Become an emotion coach. How does an emotion coach view emotions? Remember, we're talking about looking at behaviors through the lens of emotions, okay? Well, first, emotion is an opportunity for intimacy. It's a chance to get to know someone better. Why do they feel that way? What occurred then? It's an opportunity for great discussion and growing close to someone. It gives you a chance to talk with the student or the child, again, for parents who want to do this, regardless of the emotion. So I don't want to be impacted because someone's angry. I don't want to let that get in the way of me talking with them. Maybe they need a cool down time. I'm not saying that. They might need to cool down and have a conversation, but I don't want to blame the emotion and say, I don't want to deal with you because you're angry. Okay? I don't want to get impatient with the emotion. I want to be patient with the behavior so that I can get to the gist of the emotion. Respects the emotions of the child. Remember, this is all about saying, hey, I understand you're angry. Hey, you have the right to be happy. You have the right to be sad. You have the right to, okay? I want to respect that, okay? And then again, we'll talk about how that's different than dealing with the behavior. Does not try to tell the young person how they should feel. One of the mistakes I used to say is, you should be happy to my child. You're lucky. Actually, that's not my place to tell them how they should feel. I want to work with them on how they should act, but I want to tell them how they should feel. If something might get them angry that doesn't anger me, okay? Sometimes they don't understand why I'm angry when it's something that wouldn't anger them. We all respond to emotions differently, so we want to understand that we don't want to tell someone how they should feel. We want to work with them on their responses to it. You don't want to fix the person's problems, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in detail, particularly if you come back to the Thursday session. The idea is to get them to learn problem-solving skills themselves. And I'll leave that out for now. Is I don't want to fix it because I want them to learn the skills to problem solve for themselves. And we want to use these moments to listen to the child, empathize, set limits for expression, teach problem-solving skills, basically all the things I've covered in the previous things. This is what emotion coaching is about. This is really what the heart of what we'll be talking about at Thursday's session on the 5 habits. But this idea of using emotional moments to listen, empathize, and then work with. Okay. What effects of this approach? Well, one, most importantly, the child learns to trust the adult. Okay. And that's really what you want in this relationship, even as a parent. There are things, we know there are relationships where children don't trust their parents, okay? And students don't trust teachers. You want to develop that trust. You want the student to trust their own feelings, that it's not wrong to get angry, but it's wrong maybe to behave in a certain way, okay? And this is the key about not fixing their problems. You don't want to tell them how to solve it. You want to work with them so they learn how to solve it. And you want them to have a good self-esteem, and you want them to get along with others. And that's really the idea behind emotion coaching, and really what we will talk in detail about if you want to join us for the Thursday session on these 5 habits of the emotion coach. I want to thank Cloud9 World for their sponsorship. Great materials if you're looking for a great literacy curriculum for working with teaching positive behaviors in young people. This is a great series. I love these books. The kids love the little books they have. My children do. And want to thank Deeper Dive. This is a great interactive sessions that you can get involved in. Use them in my courses that I teach at the university. So I want to thank both sponsors for this time and encourage you to come back and join us Thursday for the 5 habits for the emotion coach. I apologize, put the wrong word there. Also, next week, we have Helping Kids Survive and Thrive in Uncharted Waters, and then Adjusting to the New Normal with Janae Bishop, Dr. Janae. You'll love her work and Tara Brown's work. Great people. Looking forward to having you back and joining us for those. Have a blessed day.